My next guest is Hlabangana-Clay. She is the instructional coach for K through 7th graders in Wilmington, Delaware. Great educators set out to make a difference, and Anne has kept these words on her desk to remind herself of the original reason she entered the field of education to make a difference. After 26 years of consulting, teaching, presenting, tutoring, and coaching pre K through 12th graders and adults across the US and around the world, she still absolutely loves what she does. Anne has taught and led in Pennsylvania and Delaware in public and private schools in high need, high risk areas, as well as gifted and talented students. In addition, she has taught in a TAM setting, an SAM setting, and taught pre college English course at a local community college. The legacy she leaves as an educational consultant and podcast host is building capacity and resiliency within one client and one podcast listener at a time. Welcome to the podcast, Anne.
Oh, thank you so much for having me today.
Well, tell me about a time when you came out of the trenches. You told me you had the several stories in the pre-chat and kind of how you've worked your way to what you're doing now and what you've learned from those trench stories.
Right, thank you so much. It's an excellent question. I just want to say to your listeners that I love the topic that you bring each week. It's fantastic. I think it speaks to being resilient, for those listeners. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Um, Really, the example that I want to bring today is how, not that many years ago, people were not um, in education, were not focused on the whole child.
Mhm.
It's very data meaning testing wise
Mhm.
and things of that nature, student achievement, but not necessarily addressing the social, emotional, even the physical nature that students have when approaching a learning situation or approaching an assessment. So long story short, it was very an uphill battle trying to advocate for students who needed to have a voice
Mhm.
and to have the opportunity to show their strengths in their, like I said, their social, emotional, um, physical, just in the arts, you know, um, even now for the older students with VOTEC and things of that nature, people have gifts in different ways. And I don't think that they were given the opportunities to shine. And so it was an uphill battle. So unfortunately, I was unpopular
Yeah.
because it wasn't popular at the time. And so that gets you down, emotionally. You wonder, is the fight really worth it? You're not advancing in your career and because of that. And but you know what, the most important thing I got out of it, even though it was a very troubling time, it was important, it was valuable. It didn't matter how many people were behind me, on it. I can name any number of students and families that were grateful, and some didn't let me know until later on, but they were grateful for that advocacy, that I was advocating for their child, I was advocating for them.
Mhm.
And now it is popular, right?
Yeah.
Across the country, everyone's embracing it, and but anyway, that was a time that was challenging for me. Like I said, I you know, probably did not advance in my career, as quickly as I could have. I probably did not advance in my career as quickly as I could have. I was, like I said, there were people that were against what I was trying to bring to the table
Mhm.
for schools and for districts. And but anyway, but I'm so glad, like I said, that things have turned around and there are more advocates across the country, across the world.
Mhm.
You know, if you look on Twitter, that support the growth of the whole child. So
Mhm.
important, so important.
So why do you think it took so long for a lot of these policymakers, district leaders, and the like to really see that SEL and teaching the whole child was such a need?
I think that when we think of various organizations that you've mentioned, because everything's an organization,
Yeah.
um, they're about the numbers, or they were, about the number, crunching the data and standardized tests and things of that nature are very easy to calculate.
Hmm.
It's not as easy to calculate, does somebody have an emotional growth, moment? It was not at that time.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think that it was easier. It was definitely better funded.
Yeah.
I think that, to be honest, about that, I think that there's a lot of funding behind test scores. Even today, and I think the pandemic has helped us to reevaluate what's important.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time, I think that it was just easier and a lot of funding behind it.
What do you think will change as we move out of the pandemic in terms of high stakes testing?
Hmm. Well, I think there will still be testing.
Hmm.
um, I think our approach to it and our preparation of students, if I may, is different. Taking into the account of anxiety, the mental health consequences of pressuring students, about standardized testing and teaching to the test and all that, has started to slip away, which is awesome. And
Hmm. Hmm.
we just need to continue to remember we're human.
Hmm.
They're human, and what is the end result that we want to get out of it? When we have students in front of us, what is the ultimate goal?
Hmm.
Right, to be good citizens, right, and to be good humans. um and so that looks different for different people. Different
Hmm.
students shine in different ways, and look at our world, right? Look how it's manifested through the generation. So yeah, that's my thought. Is it's we're still going to have testing. It's still going to be standardized things, and
Hmm.
I think there's a place for that. But I think it's what pressures we put and what significance we put on the testing that is starting to change, I think, across the country.
Yeah, I really like how you put that, and just the concept of grading and the concept of college entrance exams, and the
Yeah.
pressure kids are feeling from parents to get good grades, and grades aren't necessarily looking the same. And I think I've listened to a couple of podcasts and read some articles recently of just how we grade needs to change, right, with
Sure.
what's going on this year, but also in the future. um,
That's great.
I wanted to talk a little bit about your consulting firm, ANC Unlimited LLC, and you rebranded your firm in February of
Yeah.
2020. So, can talk to me a little bit about what you were focusing on prior to February, and how you rebranded, and how you serve clients now.
Okay. Thank you. So we are excited that we rebranded. Our initial focus for many years, which was helpful for
Mhm.
the needs of our clients, was very evaluative. So
Mhm.
your teacher evaluations are focused on lesson planning, um, your classroom environment, classroom management, things of that nature, professional responsibilities. So that was our focus, to get teachers from, and I use tiers, very similar to students, to that tier one or the highest level of evaluation, um, whether it be your formal whether it be your formal, forgive me, please, whether it be your formal evaluation, or whether it be just a walkthrough, or
Mhm.
just your everyday, right? I mean, because and the mindset was not, let's prepare for this evaluation. You know what I mean? The
Mhm. Mhm.
mindset was, this is what it should be every day, and somebody should be able to walk into your room, and parents should be able to, see this and experience this, and students should be able to, you know, live this and be in that routine every day. So the focus wasn't, let's prepare for a specific evaluation, but that was the mindset, was, every day is an evaluation. Every
Mhm.
day you should be prepared to the highest ability. And this is how we can prepare you for tier one instruction, and planning, etc. So right before even though the pandemic hit, I was seeing in my clients a different need. They sort of, not that they didn't, sort of had that under their belt, that tier one, that goal, right? Of being a tier one teacher, but there was more to it. And the other piece seemed to be more of the people side of it.
Okay.
Um, you know, Feeling that teacher burnout,
Mhm. Mhm.
had organizational skills, but wasn't able to put them into place.
Mhm.
Feeling like they were running out of ideas of how to engage students. And so, um, and so the company, not only for, gain clients and work with clients on those specific things, but we became more of what I would call a resource of sharing information
Mhm.
without cost. You know what I'm saying? Because the bottom line is, I want you to be able to be the best that you can be for your students, just like I am as an instructional coach. And obviously, I do have a salary, but my mission and vision is, how can you be at your best
Mhm.
so that students get your best?
Mhm.
And the same for my clients, so a lot more of, and we're Twitter friends, a lot more Twitter posts, and a lot more of the social media, just getting information out there for folks, instead of waiting for them to come to me. So therefore you hit the masses, right? When you use social media and you share that Edutopia article, that you hit thousands of people, and they learn more that way. And so that became our focus in February.
Yeah, I like how you say, how getting the word out there via social media really makes a difference. And, we're connected to so many people in the K-12 environment in all types of roles through our Twitter accounts. And, being able to get the word out there really helps, when you have a consulting firm or when you're trying to provide services, I think. And you talked to me a little bit about, um, some of the webinars that you're creating, that you're in the process of putting out there. So, what is the need that you're seeing? The districts that you're consulting with, what is a particular need that really stands out right now that you're focusing on in those webinars?
Sure. So, what several of the needs exist, and so the ones that have been the most needed right now have been your tech tools, and utilizing those platforms for asynchronous and synchronous learning. Even though a lot of schools have gone back to a hybrid model, they still have those different blended learning, right? um, models that school districts are focusing on now. In addition to that, as we talked about being that advocate, right? Starting years ago for that whole child, that is huge. Right now, school districts are wanting to learn how to blend the social emotional learning with various content areas, not just having a block of time like morning meeting, um, for the day where they're trying to infuse social emotional learning throughout the day. So that's where some of our customized webinars go to. Those particular areas are the hot spots right now for districts.
So there are several districts that have been using social emotional learning tools for a while, but do you see a discrepancy in the types of districts? So you have a vast experience both in urban, low socioeconomic districts, but also more wealthier districts in private schools. So is there a discrepancy among the type of readiness that different districts have in terms of educating the whole child?
Excellent point. Um, certainly having the private school, your charter schools, who have a lot more autonomy, if that makes sense, to make decisions about the whole child and the whole child learning. A little more time is infused into their scheduling for that. Um, Districts that you caught me on the spot here with this one. Districts that are a little more affluent tend to use their resources and they're like I said, building into the schedule um, more of the whole child opportunities, right? And so, being most recent in, again, in an urban situation, it's not just my current district. It's, I think it's just a need across the country that it's just a matter of reflecting and reevaluating. And sometimes it's those conversations like you don't know until you know, right? So sometimes when educators and others and myself as a consultant, you know, come to a district, particularly, those that are don't have it built into their schedule as often, it's new information. And so, it's not something to blame or to take fault. It's more of, oh, now I know. And now how can we, grow towards the goal of doing what's best. So I will say that particularly in our state, where I'm from Delaware, it is policy now within the state. And so it's one of those trickle down effects or trickle up, however you want to look at it. And so I think that when you have everybody on the same page, it's like anything, it's like a ripple effect, right? Once I know and I'm going to share with you and oh, best practices over here and let's go look at this model in another school district. I think that's something, and you got me on my soapbox here. I think that's something we in education don't do enough. And I think the pandemic has opened the floodgates to this, which is awesome. We don't collaborate enough. I think in education, unfortunately, we've been too competitive. If somebody's doing something awesome, right? If it be a classroom teacher or a whole district, is doing something awesome, let's go watch that. Let's go figure that out. And then, try to, bring it back to our building. So the bottom line is, I think that, there are works in progress and it's just where we are at this time, but I'm optimistic.
Yeah, and I think a lot of districts and schools are looking for what works for them. And that made me think of a PD I'm giving at a breakout session this weekend for Colorado Association of Middle Level Educators about PD, like finding your niche, either individually, departmentally, or for your school, right? Because there's so much available right now, and just
Sure.
focusing on what works, what you need at your school, because you don't want to overwhelm your staff if you're making decisions about PD. Um,
Yeah.
and you also need to figure out if you're making decisions for the school, there are staff members that know a lot more about trauma informed practices than others, or maybe rely on the strengths of your staff, right, in some
Yeah.
areas, and infuse that into the needs of your particular building. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your podcast. You got that started pretty recently, and you've had different guests on. You said you do different series every month. Tell me a little bit about the past series, a couple of different of the guests that you've had, and uh, what kind of guests you'd like to see on in the future.
Hmm. Wow, that's a loaded question, but I like it. Yeah, so I just started podcasting in August, and that was another right offshoot of rebranding, and so excited to be able to share. And yeah, so we've had the honor of having several guests on at this point. And last month, in October, our focus was on edupreneurs. So, entrepreneurs, and then you have edupreneurs, those in education who found their niche, right? And are now growing in the business world that way. So that was awesome. In some cases, I reached out to different people, and in some cases, they reached out to me, which was fantastic, to be able to get a wealth of knowledge, because not everyone who was a guest was an edupreneur. Some of them were serial entrepreneurs who shared tips and were able to go from there. But our series that we're currently in is mental health and wellness, and it's just gonna drop today, starting today. And so the focus there is going to be broad. We're going to have guests who are going to talk about self-care. We're going to have guests that are going to talk about, in education, because we've sort of gone off on that emotional roller coaster. Are we still servicing our students? Which is delicate. We get it, Um, and then we're going to move into some guests who are going to unpack a little bit about being an educator, and the whole focus on being an anti-racist and things of that nature. So everything is obviously related to how all of those things I discussed impact our mental health, and ways and tips to continue to be well through all of these different emotionally charged topics. So yeah, it's a big one, and it'll continue in through December, just because November's choppy with the holidays. It's a shorter month for educators, but we'll continue into December. But I'm excited. So to answer the rest of your question, um, yeah, it's definitely the podcasting world is perfect for what I call, PD at your fingertips. You can wash your car, you can mow the lawn, you can, go do your grocery shopping, and you can listen to a podcast. Obviously you can do it in your car. But I think that the fantastic piece is that the guests just keep on coming. Like, people are so willing to be a guest. You know what I mean? Like, I've not found anyone say, "Oh, that's terrible. No, I refuse." It's usually timing. They say, "Can you reach back out?" to do that. And I've kind of, the reason why I've been focusing on the guests and not just myself, like if there are some of my episodes where it's just me, but if I'm not the expert, then I bring the expert into the room, and that's how I feel. Um, my listeners are wanting to learn something, and my podcast is all about growth mindset, out of the box thinking, you know, um, and so therefore, like I said, I bring the experts in when I need to.
And where can people download your podcast?
Ooh, good question. So they can download it on a home is Anchor FM,
Mhm.
and they can also download it on Apple Podcast, Spotify Podcast, now iHeartRadio. Really excited about that, um, and several other apps. The pod.link is a fantastic way to get to my podcast, and it allows you to choose which app you'd like to download from.
Okay, great. I'll put that in the show notes. You also talked to me a little bit in the pre chat about your experience in different settings, and talking about how um, when you were teaching in a private school, then you went to an urban setting, and then you went back to kind of back and forth to those settings. And some of it was because of what type of setting your daughter needed to be in. And
Mhm.
also, you know, you so that just the experience having the kids that are privileged and have parental support, um,
Yeah. Mhm.
more than average. And then you've had those kids that lack a lot of the timing. The parents don't have the time to support, even if they want to. So what has that
Mhm.
taught you? Just working kind of the gamut of um, both kind of sides of the educational spectrum.
Right, sure. Yeah, so I started out private, went to urban public, went did suburban public, then private again, and then back to urban public. And I made the choice, right? I think that's what we talked about. I made the choice this last time to go back into the urban public, particularly after coming out of the private, because I had learned so much, you know. And it's not to, and again, we talk about people are districts and schools are at different places, right? But I think that everybody's learning. And so, I wanted to bring back what I had learned um, about tier one instruction, about, um, you know, so many different out of the box ways of creating the same lesson, right? The curriculum's the same, but how do we approach it? How do we, increase that engagement for our students? And and then ultimately, with the whole equity piece, I think that's the bottom line is, everybody should get the same, right? Whether you're in private, public, and I get it. There's a reason why there's a private school and there's a reason why there's a public school, but it shouldn't be about what a child receives, from their teacher. And so, you might not have the same uh textbooks, right? I mean, if we use textbooks anymore, right? You might not have the same actual, book to read from, but that's where we as the educators make up the difference, right? It's not the materials, it's what you're infusing. And so educators are facilitators, right? So if the topic is the same no matter what school I go to or what district or what country, right, I go to, if the standards are still the same, then how am I going to convey that so that my students can be thinkers, I think that's the big word there, right? Be thinkers and not just doers, right? How can I get them to think about it? How can I get them to grow and to imagine and all those things. And so it does begin, it begins and ends with us, but in a different way. We're not lecturers, right? Like I said, we're facilitators. We're facilitating the learning. And so anyway, so as you can see, I get very passionate. So I bring that passion, and I try to help educators see it that way. you know um when I look back, like it's 26 years, I have students that are very grown by now. When I look back and when I interact with them, sometimes it's on social media, sometimes it's at an event. There's my former student. you know it's about the relationships that we built, and they knew that I was invested in them, right? And I'm not saying those are not my words. That that's how they say it. I was Miss Hlabangana-Clay back in the day, or Miss Hlabangana, excuse me, Miss Hlabangana, because I wasn't married at that time. But they talk about that. You really looked and acted like you cared about us. Not just that we had a test coming up, and not just we had to get this book read by a certain time. And I get it. I understand. Educators have a lot. I just was in the classroom not that long ago. It's a lot. There's a lot of demands, other demands, but when at the end of the day, your students are only going to remember, right? What is it? What is the phrase? How you made them feel. Believe it. I know, I get excited.
No, I get that because, having been teaching for about 20 years as well, there's,
Mhm.
that seeing the formal student or seeing, you know, um, people after several years and what they remember, they don't remember the content, right? They don't remember a lesson you taught or a test they took.
That's right.
The ambience, the classroom feeling, the relationships, right? And I think your point of, you know, how students can be thinkers and not just doers, that goes across
Mhm.
any school that you're in, whether it's a low socioeconomic status setting that's not very well funded or a private school, right? Because
Mhm.
um, in some private school settings, kids might think people are going to do things for them. So,
Mhm.
uh, you know, kids anywhere can be those thinkers, right? And take
That's right. That's
matters into their own hands. And we're seeing that happen more and more throughout this past year with just the protests and social justice changes, and even, you know, 2.5 years ago with the March for Our Lives movement. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
I think kids are seeing that they can be change makers in the world, right? And we're
Yes.
just there, like you said, to guide them. I
Absolutely.
think when we started out years ago, a lot of it was kind of more stage on the stage, right? The expert in the room.
Sure.
But now, like you're saying, the kids, we're guiding them. We're making sure they have that template or that um, kind of you know the the structure to follow, but then they're taking off.
That's right. Yes. And isn't it wonderful to see them take off?
Uh-huh.
So much better than copy this down, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. So much better than having to just uh, take notes from the overhead projector,
Right,
right?
right, right. Sounds familiar from my own experience.
It
That's just
wasn't that long ago.
right,
I was in a
right,
school that had an overhead. So,
right, right, right. Wow.
well, out of everything we discussed today on the podcast, what's one thing in particular you'd like listeners to remember?
Ah, yes. Ooh, okay. I think the main thing is to think outside of the box, and whatever that is for you, the status quo is just that, right? It's just a status quo. So what can you do, personally, professionally, et cetera, that will be different. You know what I mean? And when we think about it, speaking of, our students, and those who were students, think about your inventors. They definitely didn't stick to the status quo, did they? All these inventions we've had over time. And that's what I think that's what I think I'm a dreamer. And so if you think out of the box, you got to be dreaming, right? You got to be thinking about something that's not in front of you, not already happening. And particularly in education, that's how we're now, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, why, even virtual hybrid, is working, right? I understand there are loops and, problems and things and glitches and, but the bottom line is students are still learning because you thought outside of the box. You didn't, I don't know about you, I've never lived through a pandemic. So, and I know you haven't, but seriously, we've never been here before. And yet we're, learning how to thrive, right? I might not all be there yet, but we're learning how to thrive and help our students build resiliency through all of this.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yes, it's a lot. But yeah, think out of the box.
Yeah. No, I like that. Um, kids are taking off, and they're
Mhm.
um, helping form their own learning, right? They're helping
Yes.
um, the educators think of new ways to assess students as well. Where can people find you online and connect with you?
Yes. Well, please find me online at ANC Unlimited website, which is akunlimited.org. And if they want to reach out to me via email, for the company, it's and C dot unlimited, and it's the number 4 u at gmail.com.
Great. Well, I'll put that in the show notes as well. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for being on the Out of the Trenches podcast. It was a pleasure getting to know you and talk about
Oh,
your thoughts of education.
yes. Well, the pleasure was all mine. Thank you so much for having me today and for letting me share my story.